Campfire Story.
I will grab you, I will rip you, I will eat you. It's almost funny when I think back on it. I replay those words in my head every night before finally falling asleep. Usually no earlier than around 3 a.m. on a good night. The nightmares aren't bad, I rarely have them. Actually, but when they come on with an insidious ferocity. Whenever I wake from one of my nightmares, I'm always left periodically checking my closet like a 5-year-old child for the remainder of the night, and lose any sleep I could hope to enjoy before sunrise in the process. I suppose these occasional nightmares mean I'm destined to forever remember what happened in that hotel room a few years back when I was still out on the hunt for jobs. I don't terribly mind that I can't forget. Like I said, the story is almost funny. Almost. It happened on a night like tonight. Right now, it's 2:01 a.m. Back then, it was 2:01 a.m. as well, or sometime around then. I was driving down an unfamiliar road that was fairly crowded for that time of night. Early morning. The road was called Ashton Way. At the end of this long, winding road sat the local university where I'd be interviewing for an adjunct gig teaching composition the next day. Thankfully at 1 in the afternoon. I was looking forward to finding my hotel and getting some good rest before rising and preparing some more for the interview in the morning. Checkout time would be 11 a.m. I'd get some coffee and a light breakfast and be on the way to the school as soon as I woke up. This was to be my first big boy job. I'd already signed a lease to a nearby apartment. That's how certain I was that I'd snag this gig no problem. But the start of my lease wasn't for another few weeks, and I'd quit my fast food job earlier in the summer. As a result, I found myself paying for a hotel that was the last one available and wasn't exactly cheap with what meager savings I had. It was annoying to have to fork over the money for a single night, but my hometown was over 5 hours away. I'd left my parents at around 8:30 p.m. A late start to get out on the road, I know, but I guess I didn't realize how much of the day had been eaten away by my constant stressing over the interview. But I had a reservation for the night, and I had to get to the hotel. I was thinking of modifying my stay to tonight's if that was allowed. The stress of the upcoming interview combined with late-night driving had sucked a lot of energy from me. I didn't think I'd be able to drive back the next day. The road was surrounded by businesses and restaurants on either side, and, like I said, was oddly busy for the lateness of the hour. It was Monday, and the zoo just north of here I knew had discounted tickets on Mondays during the summer months. I'd read about it when researching the area, thinking that if I ended up staying longer, I might as well find something fun to do. I remember being disappointed I'd miss out on the Monday discount. I figured the cars on the road were returning from the zoo, which had some pretty late hours. According to my research, I'd been deposited onto Ashton Way from the interstate, and perhaps several late-night zoo visitors had just gotten off of it as well on their way back home. I sighed, envying all the people I imagined returning to their cozy, familiar beds after a day of summer fun. Finally, I arrived at my hotel. It was on the far end of Ashton Way, a few miles down from where I'd first turned onto the road. Across the street was a large, well-lit gas station. A WA. I'd heard of those, but had never seen one before. Basically a QT or racetrack. Only even more upscale than that if you can imagine it. My hotel itself was very nice, too. Like I said, it wasn't cheap. Brentwood Inn was the name of it. I think it was owned by the college or had some partnership with it, seeing as Brentwood was also the name of the university I'd be interviewing at tomorrow. On the other end of Ashton Way, I parked, yawned, and gathered my backpack and the one other bag I'd brought with me. I passed through the hotel's automatic doors and entered the lobby, which was immaculate and modern with a chandelier. A continental breakfast area, a seating area populated by polished leather chairs, a sizable flat screen spewing out Fox News, a large stone fireplace. The works. Hello, sir. I was greeted by the woman manning the front desk, on which sat a bowl of apples and bananas. I recognized her voice from when I booked the room over the phone the other day. Oh, she said when I gave her my name and told her I had a reservation. I didn't realize it was you. I'm terribly sorry about the mix-up over the phone. She was talking about how she'd given me the wrong room on accident because of a computer error. She jotted down my number to call me back. and had to go off to fix it. But it was all sorted out in the end. "It's no problem," I told her groggily. I managed a smile despite my tiredness. She seemed worried I'd be mad. She probably dealt with all manner of bad guests. Upon seeing I wasn't gonna bitch at her over a minor inconvenience from a few days ago as people probably normally do, she practically squealed with delight. She sure was a chipper little thing. I imagine she must sleep during the day to be so perfectly awake and cheerful during this overnight shift. That, or she had an impressive amount of caffeine currently flowing through her veins. She didn't look young, but she wasn't old by any means. Her hair nonetheless seemed to be graying, and though she was perfectly energetic and glad despite the late hour, and her eyes you could just detect a deep, long-lasting tiredness, the cause of which was hard to tell, but it of course didn't really matter. I yawned again, suddenly, feeling confident come August I'd have a good income. I decided to splurge and ask if I could update my stay-at nights. Smiling wide, she said it wouldn't be a problem. Feeling glad to finally be getting some rest, I headed up to my room. The little green light near the handle blinked when I slid my key card, and pushing the door open, I found myself in a room that was nicer than what my new apartment would look like if a virtual tour on their website was anything to go by. The wallpaper was a pleasant, calming dark blue. The floors were hardwood, the bed was large and fluffy like some heavenly marshmallow and eagerly awaited me. The next couple of days in this strange place seemed like they'd go pretty okay after all. I had to admit, though, that I wasn't terribly confident about tomorrow's interview. I lay down thinking about what the comp director could possibly ask. Trick questions were sure to arise. I bitterly remembered being asked about 6 ways I'd use a freaking pencil in an interview at a gym that I positively botched before landing the fast food gig. Surely, tomorrow's interview would come with something out of left field designed to stump me. I began to think of what the comp director might ask beyond questions that would probe my qualifications. I thought about the history of the school. The first thing that came to mind was the mascot. It was an unusual one, a chimpanzee. I remember thinking how odd that was. My research into the school didn't state the mascot's origin as far as I could tell, but it did mention an incident involving said mascot back in the early 1930s when animals' rights weren't well respected in vaudeville acts, and the like involving animals like chimps were perfectly commonplace. Brentwood had brought a chimp out onto the football field during a big game to entertain the crowd. He was actually lent to the school from the zoo. Anyway, the incident played out like a real-life King Kong. The chimp apparently nearly snapped its leash, perturbed by the sounds of the marching band, but was thankfully reeled in by a group of men before it could attack a poor girl who could barely run while held down by the weight of her tuba. It could have been a lot worse. The school suffered a rough patch in its reputation, not helped by a rape and murder that happened the following year, committed by a homeless man who'd apparently been squatting on the campus grounds for months, evading security all the while. I didn't plan to mention any of that during the interview, obviously, but there was a chance they'd ask something stupid like what the mascot's name was. It was starting to annoy me I couldn't remember it, so I sighed, turned over, and reached for my phone on the nightstand. Before I could touch it, it buzzed and lit up with a notification. "I will grab you. I will eat you." It was a text from an unfamiliar number, disconcerting, to say the least. But still, I was more confused than afraid. I briefly wondered if I should text back. The mystery of it was keeping me awake, though I knew I needed to be rested for the interview. "I'll deal with it later," I finally told myself after a few minutes considering what to do. Still, it was hard to fall asleep. I was just sure my phone would soon light up again with a new, perhaps even more sinister threat. I began to feel vulnerable. I always slept naked. It was just my habit because I can't stand any heat and would be unable to fall asleep otherwise. Now, I wanted to get up to put on some clothes, thinking it might make me feel a bit safer. At the same time, though, I wasn't too keen on getting out of the safety of my bed. My phone came to life again, but it wasn't another ominous text. It was my alarm blaring. 9 a.m. I'd woken up at a reasonable time, but I didn't feel rested and ready for the day at all. I would have slipped on the banana peel on the floor near the front desk had the woman who checked me and not cried for me to watch out. She wished me good luck when I told her I was on the way to an interview, and I swear the crazy bitch waved at me the whole time as I left the building. Even as I was stepping out onto the parking lot, I had to stop to give a massive yawn before opening my car door. Picking up the extra night was definitely a good idea. I wasn't about to drive back home today. I was exhausted, my mind preoccupied with the strange, threatening text from the previous night. In fact, I was so preoccupied, I found that even a large coffee and some last minute interview preparation in my car couldn't keep my mind focused on what questions I might be asked and how best to answer them. As you might have guessed, the interview didn't go great. The comp director didn't seem irritated, but rather confused or even sympathetic about how tired and a little on edge I was. I performed passably, and I think had the school not closed, I probably would have gotten the job. But I can only imagine. Night 2, at this point, I was thinking there was a fair chance I didn't get the job. So I was a little depressed. I didn't want to do anything but sleep the rest of the day away, and hopefully sleep through the night without incident. I'm not exactly sure why, but when night came, I decided I'd sleep in a t-shirt and gym shorts. Maybe my survival instinct was wiser than I was that night. Maybe I just felt a little colder than usual. Maybe I was just looking for a way to feel more secure after last night's threatening text, the mystery of which I left unsolved in my tiredness. But whatever the reason, I broke my habit and lay down for sleep fully clothed. I fell asleep almost instantly. I awoke to a sound I expected to be the buzzing of my phone. I'd meant to block the number, but some part of me, I guess, was curious to see if they'd text again. I grabbed my phone and found it showed no new notifications. I nodded up my face in confusion, and then, when the sound came again, I froze in terror, grunting or moaning or even some sort of mumbling in a low, guttural voice, and movement, very slight movement, and the faint sound like someone brushing against. No, it couldn't be brushing against ... coat hangers. Was there something in the freaking closet? My eyes grew huge. I let out a little gasp and clutched the covers, trying in vain to hide. How had someone gotten in? Who else had a room key? I thought I must have been having some sort of nightmare. Sleep paralysis. I didn't have a history of it or anything, but it could happen to anyone, right? That was the best explanation I had in the moment. I wondered what to do. Then, suddenly, I heard the creaking of the closet door. As it gradually opened, I jumped out of bed. Thankfully, I didn't have to grab any clothes before making my escape since I wore clothes to bed that night. But I probably would have bolted out naked anyhow. I was getting the freak out of there. I left everything behind and didn't look back. I think I managed not to scream somehow, but I probably uttered a no, or something similar as I dashed into the hallway. Breathing hard, I sprinted down the hall and burst through a door leading to a stairway. And I probably would have run out the building and raced up Ashton had the woman at the front desk not stopped me. Whoa, she cried in alarm. She ran out from behind the desk to stop me. Sir, what's going on? There's something in that room, I screamed. At first, the woman seemed concerned when I told her this, but then her face melted into a new expression that seemed almost bemused, as if she knew perfectly well there was nothing in my room, and I was being cutely naive for thinking so. Oh really? She said. Well, why don't we go take a look? I'm Babs, by the way. Was now really the time for proper introductions and pleasantries. It really did feel as if she were my mother and was taking me back to my room to show me there were no such things as monsters in the closet. I'm not freaking going back up there. Oh, don't make such a fuss, Babs shot back at me, mildly annoyed. She beckoned me to follow her upstairs. He gets out sometimes. It isn't that big a deal. He's perfectly harmless. I swear my mouth must have fallen open in shock at that. I followed her, wanting to know what the hell she was talking about. If she wasn't afraid, I supposed I didn't have to be either. Did she keep some poor person captive in the hotel? I was starting to think I wouldn't put it past her. I realized at that moment just how off she'd seemed since the moment she checked me in. She pulled the door open and sauntered into the room, not shutting it behind her. She looked utterly uninterested as she briefly searched around. I was hesitant to step inside. I could see the closet door was wide open, the hangers strewn everywhere. Well, she said, satisfied, looks like there's nothing here. She glanced at the coat hangers and smirked. A little messy, are we? She picked up my pants I wore to the interview, which were splayed on the floor and dotted with 1 or 2 drops of dried mud from my walk across campus. A little dirty. I almost said something. No, I wasn't messy or dirty. Something was in my freaking closet. But then, this woman, trying to make her voice seductive, cut me off and said, well, cutie, You know I can be dirty too. Flabbergasted, I watched as she began to disrobe. Soon, I found a naked, middle-aged woman walking toward me. I found myself backing up, shocked and disgusted. Like Jack Nicholson after that decrepit woman in the tub came slowly approaching him while cackling in The Shining. That might as well have been what was happening. I put up my hands, telling her non-verbally to back off. I nearly said something, but I was interrupted by the sound of something rushing down the hall, and suddenly stopping. The same grunting I'd heard in bed, and now a new sound, curious hooting. Babs froze. I lowered my arms slightly and carefully peered over my shoulder. In the doorway, there sat a chimpanzee. His fur was jet black and wild. His exposed teeth were yellow and fang-like. In his hand, he held a banana. Thinking about it now, I nearly smiled. It was almost wholesome, like a picture you'd see on a zoo advertisement. But the chimp wasn't focused on his fruit. No, he was trying to peer past me. I could clearly see, for there was something very interesting about the nude woman before me. I glanced back at Babs. She glanced down at her body. She looked back up, meeting the chimp's eyes. Her face looked like she'd just realized a gun she'd put to her head as some unfunny joke was actually loaded. And she just pulled the trigger. "Jeffrey," she uttered, shaking with fright. "Jeffrey, it's..." The chimp lunged at her with a terrible shriek. I can only imagine how many people in that hotel jumped out of bed in a panic upon hearing it. I only saw a brief flash of the mauling before I stumbled out of the room and pushed past a bunch of confused and terrified guests spilling out into the hall. I still have nightmares, like I said. Likely, just thinking back on it tonight will trigger the nightmare to play once again if I do manage to sleep. When the police finally got to the hotel and shot the animal dead, they found only Babs' torso and bloody. Mangled stumps where her limbs once were. Everything above her neck was utterly destroyed. The only remnant of her head was a massive blood stain on the floor. Streaks of blood and little chunks of her were apparently also splattered all over the calm, ocean blue walls in that room. If eyewitness reports from the local paper are to be believed, the report mentioned that no one else was injured, that the chimp's rage was directed at Babs specifically for some strange reason, and he didn't harm or even pursue anyone else even as they all fled the hotel. I guess everyone was lucky enough to have worn clothes to bed that night. Brentwood University is closed. There was no recovering from what came out after the chimp attack. It turns out that even though they discontinued using live chimps as their mascot at football games, they found an alternative use for the animals, one that was both utilitarian and morally questionable, to say the very, very least. The school, like I said, suffered a major blow to its reputation after a homeless squatter on campus raped and killed someone. It turns out there have been multiple such squatters over the years, given the area where the school was built gradually became plagued by poverty and crime. The school's solution used chimps to eliminate the problem. The one who provided the chimps was the nearby zoo, just as they did when the chimps were a hallmark of the school's football games decades ago. The school maintained their partnership with the zoo and continued requesting they loan them the chimps without disclosing why. The zoo didn't ask questions because they found this actually benefited them, because the school wanted the chimps to be transported under the cover of night. The zoo had to make staff stay later as a result in order to make this possible. As such, the zoo was able to increase its hours of operation, maximizing profits. The zoo was one of the largest employers in the relatively small town, so the staff couldn't complain much about the new hours and eventually got used to them. Whenever they had to transport a chimp to the college, most staff apparently didn't care to question it, though the paper quoted one worker as saying she was told the chimps were part of some sort of display for this, or that spirit day. The unknowing zoo staff were apparently always told the chimp would be well supervised by expert trainers. College representatives seemed to want to underscore that it wouldn't be like the football games of decades past when the chimps couldn't be successfully wrangled. Regardless, word somehow never really spread about the zoo giving Brentwood chimps for shady, unknown reasons. I think they knew what they were doing was wrong, though. The reason Jeffrey, the chimp at the hotel, attacked Babs is because she was nude, and the college had trained their chimps to maul only those who were naked. The homeless who appeared on campus would be stripped of their clothes, and their clothes would be quietly donated to a Goodwill or somewhere similar, perhaps to assuage the guilt that might have come with murdering the campus trespassers. Campus security would always take any suspicious-looking people to the Brentwood Hotel, where their chimp executioner resided in the large basement. The college apparently preferred doing this to contacting the police, because the small town police, in their opinion, couldn't be trusted to do an adequate job of solving their problem. Babs was apparently the only hotel worker who knew the college's secret. Jeffrey was the latest chimp that Brentwood had brought on board as a homeless exterminator, and Babs was the first employee of the hotel to discover him. The school thought they were done for, but Babs pledged to keep the secret so long as she could keep Jeffrey as her pet. The woman was deeply lonely, as you could imagine, single her whole life, had no family or friends to speak of, according to her obituary. Well, except for her chimp, of course. She was fascinated by primate intelligence. Inspired by Coco the gorilla, she tried to teach Jeffrey sign language, but had better success teaching him how to type. I will grab you, I will rip you, I will eat you. He was talking about a banana he found in the bowl on the front desk. He'd found Babs's phone. The creepy bitch had saved my number from when I gave it to her so she could call me back while she was having some trouble booking the room. Jeffrey certainly loved his bananas. That was one thing he loved to express in his typing. You know, I sleep with clothes on now, always. It's hard to get used to it, and I often get hot. Maybe that's another reason I can't sleep. That and the image in my head of the gnarled ebony fingers of Jeffrey's paw clamping firmly into Babs's face as she wails in agony. Think I'll check the closet one last time tonight. You can never be too careful. Subscribe or I will haunt your house. If you like this video, please do comment, like, and subscribe for more. Thanks for hearing. See you in the next one.